today is a very exciting day. So it's finally here, it's finally been released, and just to give you a picture, this is on par with how I will feel eventually that one day in the future when The Winds of Winter is released. But forget about that, because a new Leona Lewis album is released today, and it's exciting. A lot to look forward to, great music. I have to admit, I did cheat and listen to some of the tracks on YouTube, and they sound amazing. I have quite a lot to say about the tracks in the upcoming review, but the only unfortunate thing is that I don't own the album yet. I did intend, up until recently, my plan was to download the album through Amazon MP3 or iTunes, which I have done for the albums Echo and Glass Heart, so I've done that, I downloaded those. The only physical CD I had was Spirit, the first album she did release, and that was the plan, that I would wait until release day, download it on my computer, move it onto my iPod, go on a long walk, listen to the album, appreciate the album, really take it in its entirety, and find out how the songs mesh together. That listening experience, however, was shattered just last week when discussing anniversary gifts with my boyfriend, because we're just about to celebrate 2 years together, that he heavily hinted at the fact that he was going to buy this for me. On the one hand, that's great that I'm receiving some gift of some sort, and it's in line with my interests, so that's good that he listened. And on the same hand, it's good that we got onto that conversation, otherwise I would have bought the album anyway, and then he would hand me the CD version a few days later, and it's like, great, but I already own this. And that would just make the gift a huge damp squib. But on the other hand, if he knew me well enough, he would know what a huge hardcore Leona fan that I am, that of course I'm going to buy it on the first day of release. So it's led me to think, does he really know me that well? But anyway, that's the story of why I don't own it yet, but hopefully I will within the next few days. And in the worst case scenario, in which he has not bought the album for me, and I will be very angry, then I'm sure I'll be rushing to iTunes or Amazon straight away on Tuesday or Wednesday to download it, and it'll still be within the chart week, so it'll still count towards Leona's chart position for this week. That's the main aim, of course. But anyway, enough with the preamble and on to the review show. Welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave, the award-nominated spin-off of A Podcast of Ice and Fire, where we review movies, books, Ice and Fire novels, Game of Thrones episodes, anime, and for the first time ever, a review of a music album. My name is Glenn, and I am Dacus Rivers from the Podcast of Ice and Fire forums, and it is just me today. But this was a topic I was very passionate about, and decided, as it's the day of release, I would hop on, sound record through Windows, record something, and hopefully it turns out okay and you'll enjoy it. The album that I am reviewing today, it is an album called I Am by popular British artist Leona Lewis. And the album is officially released today, at least in America, the United Kingdom and Ireland, with other countries to follow, so hopefully Austria, Germany and Switzerland are soon to follow, because those countries have been very supportive of Leona in the past. But I am excited to be doing this because this has been, well, first of all, I didn't think that the album would ever see the light of day, so I'm really glad that it's finally done, it's released to the public, and it appears that the record labels that she's working with, Island and Def Jam, they're really serious about promoting Leona and establishing her again within America and of course the UK, and trying to hit certain demographics to make sure that she's as successful as she can be. Whereas before, when last year I had read about Leona leaving Simon Cowell and his record label Psycho, where she had been ever since she won the X Factor in 2006, I did fear that maybe that's the last we'll hear of Leona and she won't release anything again, because a lot of times artists leave a record label and they sign over elsewhere, but you never actually hear music from them, especially when talking about X Factor contestants, that you'll hear about someone that was a finalist or someone that came in second place. They sign over to a record label, but you never hear from them again, or if they do release an album, it's very low scale. It's not very mainstream, so I'm glad that they worked out a good formula with Leona, and she got to record another album, and it's now been released, and it sounds amazing. What I'm most pleased about is that she had a great level of involvement with the album, more than any other album that she's ever worked on. I very much admire the theme of the album and what it represents to Leona and the stage that she is in with her career at the moment, and I feel that it's a theme that would resonate with a lot of people, especially with the current economic situation, with a lot of people unemployed or in part-time jobs, unable to find that full-time job to really help them get off the ground, or even if they are in employment, they're at a position they don't want to be in, or they would expect more from the career. A lot of people that have gone to university have degrees, but they don't have that dream job that they were hoping for, and they've settled for a much lower position. So I feel like it's motivational music to inspire a lot of people in difficult times at the moment. Music that can be inspirational to a large range of people. It's a theme that's being criticised at the moment, unfortunately, with music reviews. So there have been a few official editorial newspaper reviews for the album, and they have been harsh on that subject, that they've just classed it as cheesy or schmaltzy or not worth the merit. And I think it's unfortunate, because two very popular albums to come out in recent years, so Adele 21 and In the Lonely Hour by Sam Smith, their theme was well known to be about a past breakup, and an entire album about that breakup. And I think it's a similar theme, but it's empowerment and self-belief. It's a much more important theme to have for an album than just, oh, this person dumped me, how will I get over it, or will I get over it at all? Whereas with the theme of Leona's album, it's about stripping away the past, any troubles that she has in the past, and focusing on the future. And it's a very, very refreshing theme, I think, for a music album. In a TV interview that Leona did, she did say that the theme of the album does hit on the certain issues like past relationships, which a lot of songs that she's recorded in the past have focused on, but there are some songs which focus on her moving in a new direction. So songs that I think hit on that theme would be Thunder, Fire Under My Feet, I Am, Power, and The Essence of Me, whereas a few songs like I Got You and Another Love Song, those would hit on the relationship theme, which has been popular in her other albums and other songs. But it is refreshing to have an album that means so much, and it's a true body of work that Leona invested her heart in, so that's great to hear, and there's a big payoff in listening to the music. Representing the album and the theme of the album is the album artwork, which I think is the best cover art that Leona has had so far. So it's a metamorphic image of Leona with wings on the front cover, which is a representation of her development as a creative artist, and her trying to move away from that image of her as the X Factor puppet that will sing anything that is handed to her. One small criticism that I would have about the album, and it's a minor thing, but it would be the duration of the album and the total number of tracks. So compared to most of Leona's albums, which have been closer to 1 hour in length, with this album it's in total 35 minutes long, 10-track album, and I know it's quality that's important, not quantity. blah blah blah. My main preference for an album would be 12 or more tracks, but it's something that I can forgive and it's irrelevant to the review, so let's move on. So just to give you an idea of my appreciation of music and how I became such a huge Leona fan, so I guess it was around 2006 to 2008, and that was my heyday of music appreciation and buying CD albums, and I had a huge interest in music, chart related news, upcoming albums, and of course Leona just happened to coincide with that when she won the X Factor in 2006 and released her massive debut selling single Spirit in 2007. But when I was younger, when I was a young teenager, I never bought albums, I never really paid much attention to music or upcoming music. I maybe occasionally listened to some music videos and watched some videos on YouTube, music videos on YouTube, but it never really passed my attention until I met a few friends in university. They were buying this album, or they were going to HMV to buy the latest album, and it suddenly started my interest in music and paying a bit more attention to the latest music coming out, and I bought quite a lot of albums during that period, so in the 2 years maybe over 60 albums, but that has died down since then, and nowadays I only buy albums from 3, maybe 4 artists, so that would be Leona Lewis, One Republic. I bought their album Native when that was released in 2013, and probably I will buy the latest album by Adele, 25, when that's released later this year. A huge appreciation for an Irish act called The Script, but aside from that I never really buy albums, although there were a few that I sort of was tempted by, like Sam Smith in The Lonely Hour that I mentioned, Years and Years, who are a great British electronic pop group. Also The Empire Season 1 soundtrack, I was sort of tempted to buy that, but then I thought $8.99 was too much to pay for, so I decided to pass on that. But for those out there that are thinking, who the hell is Leona Lewis, let me give you the 411 on Leona and how she came to rise in prominence. So it all began in 2006 when Leona Lewis entered the popular singing reality competition X Factor, and her image to the public, her backstory, because on the X Factor there's always a story behind the artist to try and humanise the contestant, to really help the audience root for the contestant. So the image of Leona was she was a down-to-earth receptionist who had dreams of becoming a pop star. However, later the public were to learn that that was not exactly true, and Leona was a Brit School alumni, and the Brit School is famous for hosting some very popular artists today, such as Adele. Amy Winehouse was an attendee, Jessie J attended the Brit School, and a lot of other popular music acts in the UK came from the Brit School. But for Leona that wasn't exactly the right platform, and it didn't work out as well. So for Leona, the X Factor was the right platform for her to find her feet within the music industry. And also before the X Factor, she recorded a lot of demos, a lot of mixtapes, and those that eventually came to light within YouTube and online, that those songs were released and they're available to download or view on YouTube at the moment, despite Simon Cowell and the record label fighting hard to prevent those songs becoming available. They are available just now, and some great songs are still there, so you can see that there is a certain spark that Leona had even back in the day before she got involved with the X Factor, and that Brit School experience did help her in her creative process. So there's a great song called It's All For You, which she recorded before she even got involved with the X Factor. But the process of the X Factor is auditions start around August time, live shows start around October, and then it's 12 weeks until the final, and then eventually a winner is announced. And then, because it's so close to Christmas, the winner will release the single, much like American Idol, and the single will compete against other acts to become the Christmas number one, and that's the big thing that Leona and Shane Ward helped establish, and that became the trend within the UK, that every year an X Factor winner would release a song that would become Christmas number one. And the previous year to Leona, Shane Ward released his single That's My Ball, and that became a huge mega success. So over 750,000 copies were sold of the single, and that is massive. Leona performed slightly less, so 570,000, but it's still impeccable compared to the sales climate, especially back then when single sales were very low and it was all about albums and album sales back in that day. So Leona released a song called A Moment Like This, which of course was Kelly Clarkson's winner's single from American Idol, so a cover of that, and it spent 4 weeks at number one in the UK. And Leona did a few shows after that, but then faded from obscurity, and then everyone was expecting that we would see her again in time for Mother's Day, which was the trend with other winners, that you would win, you would release a single that would be a Christmas number one or chart very highly, and then you would release an album in time for Mother's Day, and it would be a huge cash grabbing, but then you would disappear and then it would be on to the next winner. But with Leona, they tried a different approach. Maybe this is part of the appeal, the reason why I find Leona so endearing, what gives her that extra edge, why I've been obsessive over news about her, information on her, news on album releases, more keen to watch TV interviews or radio interviews that feature her, and not really had that same level of interest for any other artist. And especially compared to winners of the X Factor, that of course she would be my number one winner, my favourite winner of all time, but I've never had that level of interest for other winners or other acts to come from the X Factor that became famous, like One Direction or Ollie Murs, for example. So with Leona, she did not release in time for Mother's Day, and she did not release a covers album, which would be expected from an X Factor winner or from an X Factor album. But instead it was heavily reported in the news that they were taking a different approach, that they were going to release an album of original content, and she was working with the best producers in the business at the moment to release a solid album, which I was very pleased to hear about, and that sparked an interest, that it was very intriguing what would be produced from the album, or was it all talk, or was it actually going to be good content to be released. So this truly began my obsessive phase of reading every news article that I could find, or reading a lot of forums, especially a forum on Digital Spy forums called the Leona Lewis Appreciation Thread, and also later I would read a lot of threads on the Pulse Music Group forums to find out about chart news, radio play, information on album sales, and I dread to think that huge number of hours that I've spent over the past 9 years reading about Leona Lewis and anything upcoming about her life or any projects that she's working on. But eventually we received more news later in the year, so later in 2007, around September time, that finally she will release a follow-up single, her official debut single, and this was to be a song called Bleeding Love. And the first radio play, I remember tuning into the radio, BBC Radio 1, to listen to the chart show just to hear the song, because I never listened to the chart show before, but it was all about listening to, getting the chance to hear the first single from Leona. And then I heard Bleeding Love and I was a bit disappointed by it, but then eventually I got it after a few listens to it, and I realised how great it was, how great the composition was, how it all flowed together, and all the little sound effects that you could hear as each time you listened to it there would be something more to look out for. And of course Bleeding Love became a huge international smash hit everywhere, and everyone was singing along to it. It became number one in 35 countries worldwide, and there would be, and to top it off in the height of its fame, it became number one in America So in the heyday of Leona's career, she became #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart when it dethroned Usher, Mariah Carey, and also Lil Wayne, who were huge hits at the time, to become #1. And then eventually the success followed and the album came #1, and she performed on a huge range of shows like Oprah, American Idol, Ellen. So both Bleeding Love and Spirit became huge successes, #1 albums in a lot of countries, and then so that was the best time to be a fan of Leona Lewis, at the height of her popularity, and I was there for it, and that's something that I always think I sort of miss those days when she was just cracking out the #1s and the high volume of sales. Then she had a follow-up single, Better in Time, and that became a medium-sized hit. It was top 5 in a lot of countries. It became a top 20 hit in America, and it had longevity, sustained the success of the album. But from that point onwards, that's when it seemed they really dropped the ball and didn't focus as much on Leona and moved on to other projects, or they started working on the second album, which was sort of disappointing. So it seemed like they lost the momentum that they had worked so hard to get to at that point. And then it was a huge long wait between the second single and the third single, and that didn't help sustaining the sales of the album. And then eventually when the third single, I Will Be in America and Forgive Me in the UK were released, it didn't really help at all, the singles or the albums. But they did play it right in the UK, and I think they got as much sales as they could from that album within the UK, but I feel they could have done more within America in terms of promotion or releasing singles quicker in America. In the situation within America, there is a great song that she could have released called Take a Bow, which is a huge fan favourite from the Spirit album, and that song has a very similar vibe to Cry Me a River by Justin Timberlake. But the problem was that Rihanna also released a single called Take a Bow, so a lot of fans believed that they didn't want to compete against Rihanna, so that's why the single never came to light, and they chose a different single, so I Will Be, which was a cover of a song by Avril Lavigne. And despite being a great song, it just didn't really set any charts alight. But with the UK, they did play a great strategy within the UK. So after the success in America, late 2008, and she had achieved around 2 million sales by that point in the UK. With the album buying market at the time, 2 million was maybe the peak of what you could expect, so you couldn't really expect much more. Even if you had a third single, which was a huge #1 hit, then you would still only get a few trickle sales coming in for the album. So what they decided to do is release, first of all, Forgive Me, which was an American only track, but this would be on a deluxe version of the album. And then to tie in with that, she recorded a cover of the popular Snow Patrol song Run, which she made her own, which was a massive hit for her. So that was her third #1 single. And she performed it on X Factor and then the Royal Variety Show, and it was a huge #1 smash hit and helped sell the deluxe album of Spirit to 1 million. And then shortly after, she went back into the studios, worked with a lot of great writers again for the second album, Echo. So from this point onwards, this is when the career starts to go downhill, unfortunately. So with Echo, it's released, and it's my favourite album, and it's very popular within the fan base for Leona. I think it's the best rated album that Leona has ever released as well. And it was led by a single called Happy, which became a #2 hit in the UK and also a top 40 hit within America, but it just didn't do as well in terms of airplay, in terms of sales. It didn't really help sustain the album or let it achieve a high number of sales for the first week either, unfortunately. So in America, the Spirit sold 200,000 copies, and then Echo in its first week sold 68,000 copies. Despite a huge number of promotion appearances, TV interviews, radio interviews, it just didn't help sell the album. And a lot of fans believe that other songs should have been released instead, but that album was just not as good of a success as Spirit, and it was very front-loaded as well, and because there was no further singles after Happy, the album quickly disappeared from the charts, and the same for the UK, even though there were other singles from that album. So I Got You was released as well as a single, and that was a medium top 20, not as successful single. But then after the second single, promotion stopped, and then it was back to the studios to work on the third album. And then eventually that album was released as Glass Heart 3 years later, which is a long wait for an album, especially when there were a lot of teases from Leona and her management. The album would be released much sooner, so 2011, early 2011 was the first date, then eventually that became late 2011. Leona at the time did release a song called Collide, and that had the same producers as the Katy Perry hit Fireworks, so that was exciting within the fandom that hopefully she would release a great dance track, and that would help her rebuild her audience with younger music listeners and the Radio 1 public, which Leona had sort of been shunned by, with the BBC Radio 1, who had stopped playing her songs or refused to play any new songs by her, and she was catering to a more adult listening audience. So the hope was this would help establish her again with the younger audience and help her music cater to all demographics, but it didn't work out as well. And the single was a medium success, so a number 4 hit within the UK, and then it dropped off the charts. Then the icing on the cake, the album was delayed by another year up until late 2012. But eventually the album was released, and it was a solid effort. Not as good as Echo, but I still really enjoyed the album. There's some stunning tracks on there, like Glass Heart, which is a great dance dubstep song, not a song you would expect from her, written by Ryan Tedder. There's a great song called Unlove Me on there. Then there's an excellent song, really emotional, called When It Hurts, which is my favourite song from that album. But in terms of chart success, it follows the trend of all the lead up to the first week, where it's all the promotion, all the television work that's leading up to the first week, and then there's nothing done to let the album stay in the charts and find other audiences behind the hardcore fans. So much like Echo, Glass Heart debuted at number 3, which was disappointing because we were expecting number 1, but it was number 3. Then dropped to number 10, and then eventually fell off the charts, sold maybe 70,000 copies that year, and that was a fraction, like 10% of the previous album, and then maybe 1/50th of the first album, so a huge, massive dip in sales. Then her fourth album was a Christmas compilation album, which was released the next year, called Christmas with Love, and despite my claims of being a massive fan of Leona, this is the first album that I did not buy. I was sort of tempted to buy it, but decided not to, just thinking that it's so much of a cash grab that I didn't really want to buy it, and there was maybe 1 or 2 songs that sounded interesting, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to buy that album. So I was happy to just follow the chart success of the single One More Sleep. That became a number 3 hit for Leona and a big radio success, so that was good news. That helped her with people that may have forgotten about her, so that was good news. But I was really more focused on the next album that would be original material. But then that was led with the disappointing news that the next year, in 2014, that she had left Psycho Music. There was a big news article about it that she had left. She had signed to Universal Music Group, so Def Jam in America and Universal Ireland within the UK. And that does host some excellent artists at the moment, like Iggy Azalea, Kanye West, Frank Ocean. So on the one hand, that's optimistic that she is joining a record label that might have more time for artists, whereas Psycho is a very limited resources in terms of staff, and of course Psycho would be more concentrated on One Direction or the latest X Factor winner instead of Leona. So she made the right decision to do that, to leave where she would have more support in her album campaigns. But then part of me did think that maybe it was just a light way for Simon Cowell to drop her after she had been such a huge success for him in the past, that it wouldn't go down as well if he were to just drop her like the other X Factor winners that he's dropped in the past from his record label. But then this would just be a light way for him to drop Leona, and then we would never hear from Leona again. She would never release that album. But I am pleasantly surprised with the turnout of this album. So it's a great solid work, great album from what I've heard of it so far. I've only listened to the tracks at least once or twice, but of course there are songs that I've listened to a lot of times. And I can see from the promotion schedule that she's got lined up that they're really concentrated on establishing a long-term longevity for the album rather than just the first week and getting #1 album or a top 10 album. It's all about sales volume and keeping the album in the charts. So hopefully there will be more singles released, and they make a solid effort in trying to sell the album to the public. So I'm interested to see what happens after this week, and sort of dreading to find out what happens this week if the album is not as successful. Despite what I was saying about the performance of Echo, I would love for this album to sell 68,000 copies in the first week, but that's just not going to happen. So it's a different climate, different sales climate. Leona is at a different stage of her career. She doesn't have that momentum of a huge #1 album behind her this time. It's just she has a #1 album and a top 20 album which she released 6 years ago, but it's more of a challenge to try and get those people to buy another album by her or a new audience to buy her album. So that's the challenge of the current album, and also try and entice the general public within the UK, Ireland, that have this image of Leona as a boring act, that not someone you would want to buy music from. So to shatter that illusion will take a great effort. This has got to be my favourite song from the album, at least for now. I mean, there are a few songs which are close to it that I might eventually enjoy more from the album, but right now Thunder it's just a massive anthem. I love it, and it's got a great message behind it as well. It's a song that I think I could listen to and sing along to, and it conjures up strong emotions as well. And it's possibly my favourite lead single from Leona since Bleeding Love was released back in 2007. So the song has some great lyrics. So it was written by Leona and Toby Gad, who has worked on other artists like Fergie, and a highlight for me in terms of the lyrics are, so I won't sing them, but you were rising like a star, reigning like a king, while I was waiting in the wings, but I won't wait any longer. When you let me down, I got stronger. If you wondered about the lightning out on the horizon, I'm coming back with the thunder. And that's just hits me so hard. That's just such a great message, and it means so much. And I think it's something that a lot of people could relate to in terms of a personal message. So what it's saying for Leona is obviously that in her stage, at that point in her career, she had been forgotten about, that the label that she was working with were concentrating on, of course, the big cash cows, One Direction, and she was struggling to even get a meeting with Simon Cowell or her management to talk about her next stage or what she should do next with her album. And it's a great comeback track. So because this is a comeback album for Leona, she's saying, I'm coming back with a vengeance. And it's a message that a lot of people could say as well. In my personal life, I use it as a song of motivation. So when I was at university, I studied information technology and software development, this great industrial placement, and I thought this will set me for life. I've got this great work experience, I've got this degree, what can stop me? Nothing will hold me back from applying from the top range jobs, but sadly it didn't work out that way. It was an entirely different story, and after that placement ended, I wasn't able to secure work for the next year. And then it took 2 years of part-time work and a lot of job applications before I finally found something, and it was a networking type area, which was not a subject I studied and didn't really feel comfortable with, but I thought, well, nothing else is coming around the corner. I don't have any other leads in terms of jobs, and I was offered the job, so I accepted it, and then took a huge risk. So it was a long distance, travelled every day to work, bought a new car, and then within the first few weeks I already knew that it was just not the job for me. It was not right, and I just had an inkling that the management did not like me, or they just could not wait for me to leave or get rid of me. So panic set in, but I persevered, stayed with it, tried my best that I could. Could have tried harder, but tried my best within the working hours and put in a lot of work after hours as well. But it was just not enough. Eventually, after 10 months, which is a miracle that I stayed on that long, eventually I was fired due to not working within the team structure, and that was very devastating after all that work that I put in and all the years I tried to find the job in the first place or find a next step. And it was really deflating to be in that position of being unemployed officially for the first time, and I had to just find that next job. But because I was thinking, is this right for me? Is this area of work right for me? I was very demotivated, then found the first job that I could find, and it was a call centre job, and I've been there ever since. And whilst I do enjoy it, and it's a great place to work, love the people that work there, part of me does think, oh, I just expected so much more at this stage of my life, or much better work in terms of promotions. And I know I should be motivated to look elsewhere or develop myself and develop my craft, and that will help with future leads or future jobs, but it's difficult to find the motivation to try that after such a huge blow to your career early on, especially when you look around and you've got tons of friends that have made it, or they seem to be settled within their career. So I think that's part of the reason why I love Thunder so much, because I can listen to it and think, don't give up, Glenn. You can eventually keep trying, and eventually what you want will be in sight and you'll get it. But I just need to be motivated enough and actually put in the effort. Maybe if I stop doing these podcasts. But the next single is Fire Under My Feet, which was the first single in the UK, and it spectacularly flopped in the UK. I could not believe how badly this single had done. So this is from Leona, and despite the X Factor tag or the boring act tag that she has, she's still a very successful artist, and she did set a record for the most top 5 hits by a female artist 2 years ago. And because this is such a big comeback single, you would expect much more. So I was expecting, when I first heard it, oh, this sounds great. And it was a mixture of, if you've not listened to the song, if you imagine the singles Rolling in the Deep by Adele, Love Runs Out and Counting Stars by One Republic mixed in a blender, then you add in some Christina Aguilera from Hurt, and then sprinkle some messages of self-worth and and empowerment, and you would get the song Fire Under My Feet. And it sounds like such a great song, like really hit-worthy when you first hear it, that I was expecting at least a top 5. Maybe there might be a chance it'll be a number 1, but then eventually it was released and it hit number 51 in the UK charts. Then the second week was bottom 200s in the charts, then it disappeared altogether. Now, there are some theories that this was because the label were trying to block it, that Psycho Music, there was some politics going on with the radio stations and Psycho Music, that in retaliation of Leona leaving, that they wanted to get back at her and stop any chances of her success. Which is something I would like to believe, because with a song that sounds so much like other successful songs, you would expect at least some success to generate from that. But maybe, optimistically, if the song does become a huge hit in America, that'll be justice, and that's something to look forward to if that ever happens. But the music video is also one of the best music videos Leona's done so far, and it's got a strong LGBT video, and it's all about acceptance and equality. So if you haven't watched it yet, I would recommend you watch it. The third song on the album is a song which has been very hush-hush as of late, and it's the song that us as fans have heard least about, or there have been no snippets at all released to the public. It is a song called You Knew Me When, written by Diane Warren, and I had a chance to listen to it today on YouTube just the once, and it didn't really leave much of an impression on me, but I'm hoping that it'll be similar to Happy, which I wasn't impressed with when I first heard it, but eventually grew to really care for that song, and it's high up there in terms of ranks of, best songs ever, or most listened to songs, that eventually You Knew Me When might reach that platform as well. But this is just the big ballad from the album, so Leona has at least one for each album. So of course Happy in the Echo album, Footprints in the Sand, the cover of Run that she did, and also the cover of Heart, which she released around Christmas time 2011. But a lot of the fans love it and recommend it very highly in terms of strongest tracks on the album, so I'm hoping that I'll grow to like it as much as they do eventually. The fourth song is I Am, which is the second single in the UK, so the follow-up to Fire Under My Feet, so already with that reputation. It did have a bit of a disadvantage because following up from such a poorly performing single, then your chances of success are somewhat limited. In terms of the song, I think it's my least favourite song of the album, and I just don't get it yet. I think it's similar to Brave from the Echo album, which I never really enjoyed either, and I wish that they had chosen another song for the second single, maybe something like Ladders or Another Love Song, and maybe the album would be in a better position just now. However, they might be saving those songs for better times in the year, where more promotion is guaranteed. So I'm hoping there's a long-term game plan, and it's just not something that we feel realised yet. The fifth song is called Ladders, and when you hear it, you might think, I've heard this before, or I've heard something similar to it. And you would be right. So the song is very similar structurally to the song by Sam Smith and Disclosure, Latch, which was a big hit earlier this year in America and a hit a few years ago in the UK. And then Disclosure and Sam Smith have released another song called Omen, which sounds very similar to Ladders as well. But ignoring the past success of other songs that might or might not sound like Ladders, it's actually a very fresh sounding, bouncy song, and it's very current in terms of the state of music today. So in terms of potential singles, this could be high up there in terms of successful singles from the album, if ever another single is to be released. Tapping into what I was saying earlier about making sure Leona still retains that adult audience that has bought her previous albums, the next song is The Essence of Me, and this is one of the earliest songs that we did hear from the album, and it was heard live on BBC Radio 2 when Leona was doing an interview for that radio station, and it's one of the most listened to songs of the album so far. So in terms of YouTube views, it has over 100,000 views. That's pretty good to have that lead in terms of recognition and people willing to listen to the song. It did take a few listens for the song to click for me, but I'm getting it now, and I really enjoy the song. Something that's really fresh sounding about the song, and I like the composition of the song as well. And it really hits on that message of throwing your past in the fire. That's forgotten, forget that, move on to the next step. And I really love that. So that the message of empowerment, self-belief, that's carried on to this song strongly compared to other songs on the album. And I believe it's a song that I will definitely listen to a lot in terms of iTunes most played songs. So that used to be a big thing for me with Leona back in the heyday of 2008, 2000, back in 2007 and 2008, that once I had my iPod and I learned how to do the top 100 most played song playlist, and it would be filled with Leona songs. Like at one point, 9 out of 10 were Leona Lewis songs, and then there was one song, I think it was Battlefield by Jordan Sparks, that was somewhere in the top 10. So I believe that this song is going to be quite high in the ranking for me. Now the next song is a song called I Got You, and here's where the confusion starts. So back in, if you were listening earlier, I was talking about I Got You from the Echo album, and she did have a song called I Got You from Echo, and that was the second single she did release from that album. And a lot of fans within the fan base, they wanted that to be the lead single instead of Happy, and they felt that very strongly that would have been much more successful than Happy. We'll never know if that were the case, if that had the same level of promotion as Happy, if that would have helped the album more, and if that would have helped Leona's name recognition within America or the UK. But fast forward to 2015, she's released a new album, and one of the first songs that we did hear about was I Got You. And so they are two separate songs. One is the mid-tempo track from Echo, which is one of my favourite Leona songs from that album. But something about I Got You, I think it's quickly becoming my favourite song from this album, and it might surpass Thunder in terms of songs from the album. There's just something so catchy about it, and it's devastating when you hear it and you hear the chorus kick in, and I just think this is such a jam. I love this song, and this is a song you could imagine being played in a lot of clubs and people getting up to dance to it, and it's toe tapping. I love the arrangement of the song. Now the hope is that eventually it will be released as a single. Maybe it's just unrealistic to expect this song to be released, knowing the history of Leona as an artist. For those that don't know or don't follow her career as much as I do or other fans of Leona do, there is always one song from each of her albums that is a big fan favourite within the fandom, and we all love it. We all think that it could be a huge hit if released, but it never gets released in the first place. So from Spirit there's Take a Bow, and we know about that with the Rihanna clash in terms of song titles. In Echo there was a song called Out of My Head, which is the big up-tempo track from that album, and it's quite catchy, produced by Max Martin, but that was never released. Then one of the huge fan favourites of Leona's entire career, Glass Heart, so the album title track from the third album, was produced by Ryan Tedder, and everyone wanted this to be released or wanted this to be the first single. Sadly never seen the light of day. And now we move on to this album, 2 or 3 songs which seem to be the fan favourites of the album, and that's Another Love Song, Ladders, and I Got You in terms of chart success or chart predictions. There's no way to know if they will be successful or not, but they sound so fresh and current that they could compete with songs in the chart at the moment. But I guess we will find out in due course. The 8th song is Power, which is one of the songs that we heard a snippet of a few months ago when Leona released snippets of 5 songs. So that was Thunder, I Got Thunder, Power, Ladders, I Am, and Fire Under My Feet. So we heard snippets of those songs, and there was something really great about that snippet, that the final 10 seconds of the song that really wanted me to hear more. And eventually when the song was released, it was a bit of a letdown because I expected it to be much better, but still I think it's going to be a great track. It follows on with empowerment and power, the power that you feel inside. So I think it's another song with a strong message. And I'm also pleased with the fact that it's not closing the album or hidden away, but it's right in the middle between 2 very big dance songs. So it's really enforcing the variety of the album. That's one thing that I really like about the arrangement of the songs within the track list. Moving on to Another Love Song, and this is the most fresh song of the album. I would say it sounds great in terms of the sound effects, in terms of the arrangement of the song. So it's a song that you could imagine being in a lot of clubs and a song that would be played on BBC Radio 1, Radio 2, all over the place. And very similar in sound to Jessie Glynn at the moment, who's been very popular in the UK with 4 #1 dance singles, and it's got a similar song composition. And in fact, the song reminds me of 2 songs that Leona was sort of rumoured to be involved with. So that one song was, so it's got a nice tropical vibe at the start, which I really enjoy, but it reminds me of, one is a song called Not to Love You, written by Ryan Tedder, and this was supposed to be rumoured to go to Leona for her 3rd album, but then that news sort of disappeared, and then eventually a song materialised, recorded by Sean Paul, which was called Got to Love You, and it was the same song, just like a few word changes. And then secondly, there was a song called Burn, which was supposed to go to Glass Heart, and that had a similar tropical vibe. And it was a song that we heard early on when there was an interview with Clive Davis about upcoming artists, and they played a 3-second snippet of the song, and everyone was so hyped to hear the song in full. But then when the album track list was revealed, that was not on the album, and then everyone had forgotten about it until 1 year later, and Ellie Goulding, popular British artist and singer of the theme tune to 50 Shades of Grey, of course, released Burn, the song, with of course no reference to Leona, and that became a huge smash hit for Ellie, both in America and the UK. So that's one of the devastating things about Leona's long history. So as you all know, or you should know, Leona did have the chance to, or as far as I know, Leona did have the chance to record We Found Love, which was later recorded by Rihanna, and that became a huge hit for Rihanna, of course. There are some massive songs with hit potential that she has recorded in the past, and we've heard the demos because they are on YouTube. So Scene of the Crime, Perfect Stranger, Strangers, those are all very popular unreleased tracks that Leona has recorded, and they are songs that I wish were on the official album releases or released as singles. And I always imagine in a different world what her success, what her career would turn out like if those songs had been recorded or released. But anyway, with those 2 songs, so Burn and also Not to Love You, it's almost like a mixture of the 2, but it creates this burst of energy, fresh, exciting sound, and it's something that I can imagine being played and being played in the nightclubs, it being very popular, a song that I can imagine being a #1 single and having this great fresh video concept as well. But that again, once again, that's something that I hope the record labels Island and Def Jam have in mind in terms of future and promotion this time next year perhaps, or early next year. Now, closing the album is the song Thank You, which is a song that, as we know, Leona did write in reference to her parents and also to her fans for supporting her every step of the way, even in these troublesome times over the past few years, and still being there to support her. And it's a big ballad song to close the album, very similar to the song Fingerprint from Glass Heart. And it's another song which I've only heard once, and I'm sort of on the fence of whether I enjoy it or not. Hopefully it's something that I'll listen to a bit more and really appreciate it more. But it's another song which is appreciated within the fandom, certainly. This has, of course, been a review of the standard edition album that has been released, and it's the 10-track album, but of course there is a deluxe version of the album. Now, much like how I mentioned my boyfriend heavily hinted that he was buying this album, I also heavily hinted that I would like to have the deluxe edition, but I'm not optimistic that I'll get that, because he was quite vague about it, implying that he's just bought the standard edition album. But hypothetically, if I was just buying it myself, the album, downloading it through iTunes or from Amazon like I was intending to do, I would have only bought the standard edition anyway. So ever since Echo, I did buy the deluxe for that, but I've not really been much of a fan of deluxe albums of late, so I most likely would have just bought the standard edition. But also with the standard edition, I'm thinking that's a universal album that most people will buy, the standard edition, so that's why I decided not to review tracks like Thick Skin and The Best and the Worst, which are of course on the deluxe version. But I certainly want to show my appreciation for anyone that had the patience to listen through this entire review. So I really appreciate that. It means something when you do take the time, and just to in the hope that someone out there is still listening to what you have to say. So I would like to thank you for that, and I look forward to recording other episodes, other reviews. There's nothing planned that I have planned at the moment, but the Vassals of Kingsgrave, they're doing a very long reread of A Song of Ice and Fire, if anyone wants to get involved with that. And they're also doing reviews of Twin Peaks. So you can visit VOK on vokpodcast.wordpress.com. Visit us on iTunes, of course. And also, if you want to take part in the discussions or preparation for the podcast, you can join some of the hosts on a podcast of iceandfire.com/forums, Vassals of Kingsgrave forums. But that's all I have to say for tonight, so thank you once again, and good night.